Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, fine as Aster. This is Battlefield 5, or at least the alpha of said game. In today's video, I wanted to take the time to talk a little bit about the medic and support class, specifically about scarcity and attrition, what is being heralded or marketed as one of the new aspects of this coming Battlefield game, aimed at making it a more competitive, a more, at least in the long run, fulfilling experience. Now, in today's video, what I really want to cover is why this system is being introduced, whether it actually works and accomplishes the goals it sets out to accomplish. Obviously, that's going to be a partially yes, partially no. And lastly, how it can be improved on. Because while there's plenty of people out there saying simply that this should be altogether abolished and it's generally just not a good idea, frankly, I disagree with them on the first note. I think there is some elements of this which are actually worth keeping. And secondly, knowing DICE, they never fully back down from an idea. So if we want to change this for the better, we're going to have to propose changing the system within the limits of the actual system and not just completely abolishing it. They're never going to go for that. I'm sorry to say, DICE doesn't listen to the community to that extent. At least my personal experience, my personal opinion. You're free to disagree. That being said, let's start off with the goals of this system. What the developers, at least publicly, seek to achieve by introducing these changes. Now, the first of those is a new layer of tactical gameplay, tactical thinking regarding ammunition, regarding health. And this is, well, undeniably the case. You may not like it, you may think it is too much, but frankly, you do have to consider how much ammunition you have. We'll get a little bit later into some of the more negative effects of this, but this goal clearly they do meet. The second of the supposed goals of this system is encouraging more team play and inter-reliance between different classes. So the assault class relies on the support class relies on the medic, and they all frankly just rely on each other. You can't really live without any of them, other than maybe the scout class. But that's always going to be the case, and there's always plenty of people who want to snipe. So I don't think we should worry too much about the snipers no longer showing up on the battlefield. At least that is not the case in the alpha. Now on this note, I'd like to at least divulge my opinion and my experience from the alpha. There is no more team play, just because you make the game harder to play without it. Frankly, randoms are never going to properly engage with other teammates in 90% of the situations. Few people actually revive consistently, or even more important, drop health or drop ammo. It just doesn't happen as often as it really should, and you can try and force it as much as you want as developer. That's not going to change the way people play the game. The sooner DICE realizes and acknowledges that they have to design the game around what players are willing to do, willing to change about their personal playstyle, the better the game actually will become. So in this sense, I don't think there is much of an encouragement of team play, because people are just stubborn. They're always going to be bad at the team play elements of Battlefield 1. And if you really want a team play orientated shooter, at the same time, however, have it mass marketable and fun to play for everybody, the best way really to do it is to have team play as bonus, as ways giving yourself, your team, your individual squad members an advantage over those who are not engaging in team play, but not necessarily directly punishing players who don't engage with team play to the same extent. Because frankly, that's going to make the game less enjoyable for, I would argue, a majority of people who actually play Battlefield 1. My take on it, my experience, feel free to disagree. The third supposed stated aim of introducing the scarcity and attrition system is avoiding the spawn, die, respawn cycle. Basically, that there is no consequence to dying, there is no issue in doing so. Now, I'm not quite sure how this system actually prevents this or discourages this, because frankly, you don't actually get very much more ammo from stocking up beyond what you already had to begin with. So as assault, you start with 2 magazines. If you go to a resupply station, you can stock up all the way up to 3 magazines total. That's still only 90 bullets, which means for an average player who actually gets every kill he engages on, maybe 6 kills, maybe 7, you're out of ammo, not accounting for the little bit that you pick up. Maybe you're up to 8-9 kills then, but you're not reaching a 10 kill streak unless you're very conservative with your bullets and very accurate with your shots. This is assuming that you kill everybody you start shooting at, just by the way. Or you actually go and resupply in between. So it doesn't, in my experience, actually combat that respawn mechanic issue that they supposedly don't want. in any way, shape, or form. We'll talk a little bit later in this video how they could encourage that, but as of now, as it works now in the alpha, that is definitely not the case. So how does everything work besides those three goals? Because there is some other consequences, desired and undesired, that they want to go for. And one of them is actually encouraging more skill-based gameplay. And for the reasons outlined above, that is partially true, partially not true. So the new layer of tactical thinking that goes on, for those players who don't want to be left out of ammunitions on a flank, is absolutely to be considered a skill, even if you don't enjoy it. It is frankly making the game a little bit more complex. Doesn't mean necessarily it's a good complex, but it is complex. There is, however, also other parts which make it, in my opinion, less skilled, because being reliant on other players to personally succeed, in my opinion, is a mechanic that undermines the players who are capable of doing the job on their own, or who get put onto teams which maybe are losing because the players aren't willing to engage in good objective play or engage in good team play, dropping ammo, dropping health. So instead of that more skilled player then being able to try and compensate for those players, he's dragged down by an already bad team, making a bad team worse and the good team comparatively better, creating a balance issue. But most notably from my play experience in the alpha so far is the consequential difference between the power of the attacking and defending team on a more streamlined, on a more confrontational linear game mode. That could be Frontlines, that could be Rush, or it could be the new Grand Operations, or whatever exactly they're calling them, with the different modes that are generally set up similar to previous operation modes. They're very, very linear maps. Consequentially, the defensive team sits on the objectives and waits for the enemy to come to them. They have their installed, sometimes even ammunition and health boxes, and even in a team full of incompetence, one or two people end up dropping health on that point because there is quite literally 32 players there. So you end up with unlimited ammo and unlimited health and even a decent chance to be revived given how much cover now is around on objectives, which just by the way is a good thing, the amount of cover, not necessarily a bad thing. Now the attacking team has a choice. They can try and brute force the objective by just all zerging onto it. Generally, a team doesn't necessarily have the organization to do so or the knowledge to operate as a hive, and B, it's not very enjoyable and results in huge amounts of losses and deaths, and people want to do well. So people flank, people try to take intelligent routes to the objective. The problem with that is that they usually go through areas without supplies, without resupply or health stations, and more importantly, they're usually traveling in smaller groups, where the chances of having an active, responsive medic as well as an active and responsive support collectively are quite low. Unless you're playing with a group of friends where you make sure you've always got one support and one medic on hand and ready to do their job, you're going to end up shit out of luck. Consequently, the attacking team, which already has a tough job, actually has a worse, an even more difficult job. And I found, at least in this operations game mode that we've had to test here in the alpha, the defensive team almost always wins. I think I may have seen one game where the attackers won, and this is out of 6, 7, 8 hours of playing just that game mode. So easily 16 to 20 games and one offensive victory. Now, maybe I was just unlucky. Maybe I just ended up in games where the defensive team always won. That is theoretically possible, but if you think through the reasoning, it makes sense that the offensive team is weakened by this system. And frankly, I don't think the offensive team needs further weakening and doesn't need further obstacles to what they are facing already, with a team well defended, well placed on objective, generally already having the defensive advantage as you would expect them to have. So there we have some of the problems and principles behind scarcity and attrition. So how can we make it better, in my opinion? Now, for the ammo, actually, I think one of the best ways to improve it, while keeping the system alive and some of the benefits of the system, the more tactical, trying to avoid the spawn, kill, die, repeat cycle, is actually to make the overcharge, that is, when you resupply your ammunition beyond what you actually spawn in with, much more significant. So go from only 1 extra magazine to 2 or 3 extra magazines, possibly even extra gadgets. Now, you do have to be careful when it comes to extra gadgets. Too many grenades and we all know what happens. Look back to the Battlefield 1 days, specifically the early Battlefield 1 days. But if done right, and DICE does have multiple months before this game releases, so plenty of time through public alphas, closed alphas, public betas, closed betas to fine-tune it to where they're sure there's not too much gadget spam, actually figure out exactly how far they can go with the overcharging mechanic. I think that would be a very interesting way of better introducing this scarcity and attrition principle while giving more emphasis on preparing for battle and taking that step to resupply, but not screwing somebody who wants to go in a small team or alone on a flank or on a little bit more of an elongated kill streak. After all, we're not all 1.5 KD players. Some of us like to do a little bit better in their games. Not necessarily me, frankly, but there's plenty of players out there who want to and are able to. Further on the ammunition note, actually, I think we should be getting more ammo from downed enemies. Specifically for individual classes, it should be adjusted. So, for example, the Medic and Scout class, generally using their medium and long range options, I'm sure they will also have close range options, for a matter of fact the Medic already does, generally don't actually end up being close enough to the target to safely pick up the ammunition that target drops. Therefore, to somewhat compensate for that, if you're using, say, a long-range SLR as Medic, when you do actually pick up ammunition from a body, you should get more. Let's say not just a quarter or half a magazine, but an entire magazine. Whereas the Assault, who logically, fighting more in close medium range, more frequently actually can pick up the ammo of the victims he downs, should be getting less ammo. Well, frankly, not less than already now, but a similar amount than what he is able to receive now. That way, it makes a little bit more sense and is more fairly balanced between the individual classes. When it comes to health then, things are a little bit more complicated, frankly. You have this super fast regen introduced now. Basically, auto regen doesn't regen you fully, but it kicks in really fast and it heals you, I think, as fast, if not faster, as a med pack would in previous Battlefield games. So really fast. The problem with that is prolonged firefights are ruined by it. So if you take a bit of damage in a medium range to long range firefight, you just hide behind cover, you instantly be back to health and can continue fighting. So you don't have this mechanic where your enemy gets 2 shots into you, clearly has the advantage, you have to hide behind cover to not die, and they can push you. No, by the time they've arrived at your position, you're again at full health and you're going to start the firefight over again. That's bad. On the other hand, quick health regen is good for making one-on-ones fair. If everybody's at the same amount of health at all times, generally the engagements are more fair. You need to balance this, obviously, because you don't want players being able to take 5 people out, just insta-healing while they're taking damage. That's silly. Nobody is going to argue that. But you need a balance between the two. And if you have this relatively quick auto health down the lines of, for the fairness of, I guess, one-on-ones, that's the only reason I can come up with it for, then why are we not healing for full? Why are we only healing partially? Because for most players, the consequence of this is they heal full enough to not care, and you therefore do not encourage the medic reliance. However, those players who do take a bit more damage, and the better you are, the longer you survive, the more likely you are to take a significant amount of damage to where the point where you do not fully heal again, but continue to actually live, you do not die. Those players are most affected by that. The most skilled players, the most successful players. And that's where I disagree with it. As well, it's a simple buff for snipers, because they will now have one-shot targets on many infantry targets without needing headshots because of the low health count. Partially, DICE has addressed this by decreasing the minimum damage of sniper rifles, what seems to be down to 60, but that fully doesn't address the problem. If you take enough damage, you are going to be consistently liable for a one-shot body shot from any scout rifle at any range, unless you can find a medic or a health station, which in certain parts of the map, as especially attacker, can be so impractical that you rather actually die than have to run 100 meters backwards from the front lines to get a chance of getting healed. And then we come back to the spawn, die, repeat mechanic, which is being encouraged by just that. And then specifically for those players who succeed, more likely at least for those players who are successful. So not skill encouragement, but actually hampering skilled players instead. So it all doesn't make sense. Forcing players to disengage from fights because team play isn't as strong as an element as DICE wants it to be is a little bit of a problem. Overall, this leaves support in a slightly more important position. That is the way it's designed now. If they make the changes I've proposed, frankly, I think support will be in a great position. And possibly even, who knows, maybe support players will stop dropping a little bit more of ammo. That would be quite a miracle in itself. Regarding the medics, they've got the longer revive system, which makes them vulnerable. Frankly, though, we don't have dragging and the full revive mechanics regarding watching in yet, so it remains to be seen how strongly they are affected. But I think they're getting a nerf. They're less relevant for the majority of players, more relevant for a small number of players, but that doesn't mean they get more points. It just means they have less people to heal and are less likely to actually help those people. Furthermore, their revive roll has been hampered, so I'm not quite sure what to do with the medic to better them up, because DICE isn't going to let go from this limited heal system they currently have in the game because they believe it encourages skill. For the reasons I've outlined, it partially does, but it partially doesn't. That being said, I'd love to know what you guys think about scarcity and attrition, as well as the role of the support and medic in Battlefield 5. Have you had any experiences in the alpha relating to it, or have you watched gameplay other videos and have been able to form an opinion on the matter from there? Leave that, as well as, of course, your usual video suggestions, especially regarding Battlefield 5 alpha content, down below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.